ESPN NBA insider Brian Windhorst joined Wes and Walker last week to talk about the Charlotte Hornets, the perception about LaMelo Ball, and a potential sale of the Charlotte franchise. We'll get to all of that with David Walker today on Locked On Hornets.
We're Locked On Hornets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
In a minute, cuz we live.
It's Locked On Hornets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. It's your team every day. Thank you for making us your first listen. We're free and available anywhere you get your podcast. That includes YouTube. That's Doug Branson. You can find a Substack, Every Hornets Boxscore, on everyhornetsboxscore.com. And you can also check out David Walker on Twitter at David B. Walker. Sometimes people call him the Sultan of Sneakers. Sometimes people call him Pharaoh of Foot Candy. And sometimes people just call him David. It doesn't matter. He is the man, and he joins us weekly. David, we appreciate you, man. How are you doing?
That would be a first for the Pharaoh of Foot Candy, but let's try them all on. Let's see how they fit.
Think it
I'll tell you what,
fits.
guys.
It does
This
fit.
camera, every time I come on here during beard season, it looks like I have a massive just 80s baseball player goatee. For those not watching
you look
at
like
home,
you look like a reliever from 1984.
Right. Yeah, the rest of this is just gray, but it looks good. Let's go.
Yeah,
with it.
David only brings one pitch to the mound, and that's a fastball with that facial hair. There's no curveball. He's throwing right down the middle and some steam. Speaking of steam, are you ready for Spicy B, Doug Branson? Because he's here. He's standing up these days. I mean, this season has gotten to Doug. I mean, look, I can't blame him. It's gone to all of us. But Doug, are you ready for Spicy B?
I am, of course. Yeah, that's why I'm here this morning. First morning.
I'm ready to hear from
talking
David.
out of the
I talked too much on the last episode. I'm gonna really just try to seed some ground here to David and his wisdom because I talked a lot in the last episode.
All right, well, let's talk a lot about LaMelo Ball. I'm sure people want to hear about him because, you know, last game against the Boston Celtics, we know the same problem here of personal fouls. He had 5 personal fouls in the last game against Boston. I mean, it's becoming kind of ridiculous. I don't want to talk about it anymore, right? Like we've already dissected it as much as we can because he gives us so many games to discuss. But still, LaMelo is your franchise player. He scored 25 points. He gave you 6 assists and 5 rebounds. It wasn't a very efficient game from the field, but it pretty much was from the perimeter, shooting 5 of 12 from beyond the arc, 12 no matter how many threes that is. It's actually 1 3 above his average. So only 1 3 above his average and how many field goal attempts from beyond the arc he's taking per game. It's pretty ridiculous what he's doing. And so Brian Windhorst joined us last week on Wes and Walker, 12 to 3 p.m., 92.7 FM. So we talked with Brian, and we asked him a whole bunch of questions about LaMelo Ball, Miles Bridges, and all that. We'll play some of those sound bites throughout the week. But here he is talking about the perception of LaMelo Ball around the NBA.
The view of him is very, very high. People like his makeup. They like the way he plays. I think players want to play with him. I think there is an attraction there. Obviously, this season's been totally wrecked by those 2, ridiculous ankle injuries. But there's a lot of respect for LaMelo Ball in the NBA, no doubt.
So when you talk about the kind of positioning that he has surrounding other players in the NBA, it's interesting, right? Because his point per game average has gone up to 24. I was looking at 25 for him to flirt with some all-NBA range type stuff, with the Hornets absolutely contending for a play-in spot. But the efficiency starting to go down, the three-point volume is up, and he's still a great shooter. But, there's certainly the foul problems, the defensive problems. What do you make of that soundbite, David, to hear from Brian Windhorst that, no, the NBA still values him, towards the top of any of the young stars in the league?
Yeah, I'm not saying it's surprising. I just thought there would be a little more of a hesitation just because of the refs for one thing. Now, was Brian speaking more from a player's perspective, from a coach's perspective? Was there any context on the background of that, or is he just saying kind of overall how everyone sees him?
So Wes asked him just the perception around the NBA, him as a leader, him as a young player, what his ceiling can be, just the overall value, I think. Yeah. And so he didn't specify whether that was GMs or authority figures or players. So I just think he was just answering the overall value.
Well, that's good to hear. I mean, honestly, because I was getting the feeling that it was kind of dipping. And, when you dip in on
Right.
podcasts or blog posts or things like that, it feels like there's some negative energy around LaMelo. Now, a lot of that is just collateral from the Hornets, I feel like. But I do feel like some people are starting to look at him like maybe he shoots too much. The fouls are an issue. And I think he's definitely got to clean that up. A lot of that is his fault now, but he's to the point now where you can look at some of those fouls, right? And you say, well, other stars aren't getting called for that. But he has made his bed now with those. He's got to clean that up. But I think it's encouraging to still hear that, he's thought of highly across the NBA because he's still growing. He's still, learning. He's still getting his feet under him from an NBA standpoint. So no one's more plugged in than Windhorst. So I think it's encouraging from a Hornets fan standpoint to hear that he's still regarded highly just because of the negativity around this team. It's hard to see out from under that, I think, this season especially. So overall, I mean, it's a good thing to hear that he's still, up on the upper echelon of that young star tier.
Well, yeah, that's where I was kind of getting at. You took it right there. It's the fact that there is so much negativity surrounding the franchise. You do see the Zach Lowe article about his defense, but you also see the caveat at the beginning of that breakdown that LaMelo is so young and he's going to be fine. But there's just so many negative things surrounding the franchise, and pretty much all of it's not LaMelo's fault, right? LaMelo has stopped fouling. No player is perfect in the league. You have these very, very little things, but still, there's just so much. Who cares? It's the Hornets. They're, a bottom team. So I am happy to hear that the perception is still very high. What did you take away from that comment from Brian Windhorst?
I'm not happy at all. I don't want anyone around the
Shocker.
league respecting LaMelo Ball or liking LaMelo Ball or doing eye emoji tweets at LaMelo. Everyone, keep your eyes on your own team, your own players, don't even look at LaMelo Ball. We know how talented he is. We don't need any of that validation from NBA GMs who hate the Hornets anyway. We don't need validation from LeBron James or any of these players looking at LaMelo. No, everybody keep your eyes on your own team. Leave LaMelo Ball alone. We understand that there are concerns here in Charlotte with some of the things that's happening around LaMelo Ball, but we also understand the context, and the context is he's not surrounded by a lot of talent. The context is he's had several injuries in his pro career so far. The context is this team has been extremely injured, and so I don't think that people are being like overly judgmental of LaMelo Ball this season. I'm glad he's going through it this season. I'm glad he's working out some of these foul issues. In that last game against Boston, he did let the frustration get to him ultimately, but I saw LaMelo Ball in the first quarter who was actually starting to think a little bit about fouling and different things. And look, if this were a season that was on the margin, like they were actually a playoff or play-in threat, and he was making these mistakes, I go, oh man, that's really devastating when your team leader is not performing in a way that could get you over the hump. But the Hornets are not even like in the same zip code of the hump, right? And they're not even in the same state as the hump. Okay, so there's no getting over the hump. They don't even see the hump. I've said a lot. I've said the word hump a lot. I'm sorry. I'm going to go ahead and stop talking now.
And Walker, you hit on something I didn't even mention, which is ridiculous, is his age. How young he is. He's still, what, 20? Or is he turned 21 yet? Okay.
Yeah.
So congrats. Happy birthday, LaMelo. But, you don't think about that. And you think about his growing up. He always played. He was always the smallest guy. He's had to learn. This finishing thing right at the rim. I think that comes from him being the littlest guy on the court forever, having to flip it up around taller guys, maybe not being as used to going through guys and driving through traffic, getting that contact. And so he's had to still learn how to play defense. I mean, guys, he didn't go to college. This is by far the best coaching, obviously, he's ever had. I mean, that goes for about everyone who gets into the NBA. But I mean, look, he's being taught how to play the game on a different level now. He's still learning. And he's leading the team. He's the face of the franchise. He's the face of Charlotte sports at this point. I mean, it's a lot for a 21-year-old, and he's still performing, at least individually, at a very, very high level. And to Doug's point, maybe it's a good thing they're crapping out this season, and he's getting these kinks worked out so that he can just throw it into, second gear when they start getting something going.
The weird thing about LaMelo's defense is that, like, the few possessions that he got switched out onto Jason Tatum, there was one where he got burnt by Tatum. Look, Tatum's burning everybody.
Everyone. Yeah.
But there were a few possessions that he got one-on-one with Tatum where he actually did a really good job defensively. He locked in. He was focused. He didn't get blown by. there were two things that I'd like to see moving forward because the season's over. Let's just say that. The season's over. I'd like to see
Don't
more.
be so quick with that, Doug.
Well, okay. I think the record is indicating that the season is over. Okay. So I'd like to see them shift to youth. I'd like to see them move more of these young guys, James Bouknight, Kai Jones, that we haven't seen in a while. I'd like to see more of them, but I'd also like to see them play LaMelo and not hide him as much on defense. Give him the challenge. If winning suddenly becomes not the first objective, then I'd like to see them challenge him a little bit more defensively and help him, develop some of those habits that can help him defensively in seasons to come.
Well, just what you were talking about, I tweeted it out, very visibly not fouling, was going like this. There was a missed shot, and then he went after the rebound.
Right.
It was already possessed by Boston. He's about to do it. You can tell he wants to foul that guy so hard. He wants to push him because of the frustration. And then he's like, all right, nope, I'm not doing it. And there was 2 times he did that in a 4 or 5 possession
and then what happened? He played with the bench. The bench can't shoot. He had to do everything. And then when he tries to do everything and fails to do so, he gets super frustrated and he falls back into the same habits. So this is all, I think it's all growth for him. And, I'm not worried about LaMelo, but we have to point out the concerns. We have to, when we see something, we have to say it.
All right.
But I think one
ahead,
last thing, if I could,
yeah.
I'm fine. Shoot all the shots, shoot every shot, especially when he's playing with that bench unit. As to your point, Doug, like he's playing with one hand behind his back a lot of these games. And so for him to take those shots, and your point about the Tatum thing, Doug, I think that was just, I'm sick of this. I'm sick of the Boston fans booing me in my home building of the MVP chance for the other guy. I think, yes, exactly. I think that's a good sign. That's his competitive nature. We know he loves to play basketball. I think this is all good stuff. If they could just get the team cleaned up, we'd be right back where we want to be.
Yeah. By the way, we didn't talk about Tatum yesterday, but just real quickly going over his numbers, the last 4 games, 51 points, 33, 31, 44. Those are the last 4 points. And then he's 32 of 32 from the free throw line. His last 5 games. 100%.
I was real high on Tatum. No one else was. I was real high on Tatum. I kept telling people, like, Tatum, he's going to be a big star. But I was like, no. Just like Walker Kessler. I was high on Walker Kessler. Look at him putting 2020s
There we go.
up for Utah.
Here we
I
go.
mean, nobody listens to me around draft time. They should, though. I'm going to talk less. I'm going to talk less in the second segment. I promise. I'm not going to bogart the show. I apologize.
Was Kessler the 15th throws, or was that like in the single digit? Was that the 9th throws you gave out?
Oh, I loved Walker. I said Walker Kessler would be a good drop down in the draft a little bit. Grab Walker Kessler.
Perfect.
Huge.
There you go. Yeah, Doug, if we only had you as the GM, then we'd have Walker Kessler. We'd have 3 centers. You'd have gone after Duren, Mark Williams, and Kessler.
Yeah, baby.
Well, because look, you're just giving yourself more of a chance to hit on one. I mean, the Hornets have hit on almost none. I mean, Mark Williams looks good, though.
All right. Speaking of the context of the situation, there's another Brian Windhorst soundbite I want to get to. Unless Doug wants to talk over it, that's fine as well. Coming up next on the Locked On Hornets podcast.
Don't go to sleep on the Hornets just yet.
We did ask Brian, me and Wes, about the chances of LaMelo possibly turning down a rookie max extension to go to a different team because of said context, because there's not enough talent around him right now. Would that frustrate him enough to actually leave the franchise? We'll get to that soundbite in just a moment, but not before we discuss Rocket Money. This episode is brought to you by Rocket Money. Rocket Money was formerly known as Truebill, and it's a personal finance app that finds and cancels your unwanted subscriptions. It monitors your spending, and it helps you lower your bills all in one place. Over 80% of people have subscriptions they forgot about, like that streaming service you bought to just watch one show, or that free trial that you actually never used. Rocket Money will quickly and easily identify your subscriptions for you, so you can stop paying for the ones that you don't want anymore. Over 3 million people have used Rocket Money, saving the average person up to $720 a year. That's right, $720. Stop throwing your money away. Cancel unwanted subscriptions and manage your expenses the easy way by going to rocketmoney.com/LockedOnNBA. That's rocketmoney.com/LockedOnNBA. One more time, rocketmoney.com/LockedOnNBA. More Windy coming up next.
Walker, can I say one thing before we start? Because it's on Jason Tatum. It's what we just talked about, okay? Jason Tatum, I meant to say this in the last episode. Jason Tatum, 51 points. Congrats, sir. MVP caliber stuff. But, 9 rebounds. Like, come on. You didn't even get a double-double. Like, is that really a great performance if you don't get a double-double? I think not.
That's what you wanted to interrupt me with, the Jason Tatum.
Well, I just wanted to point it out. You look at 51 points, you go, wow, that's great. And then you have 9 rebounds. Like, get the 10th rebound.
Tatum is a scrub. Put that on the title of this episode. LaMelo is not, and that is not the perception around LaMelo across the NBA. But we are worried about him possibly leaving, even if it's unprecedented as far as somebody turning down a rookie max extension. But because of what you talked about, Doug, the lack of talent, the lack of positioning for this team to try to contend for not even a play-in spot this year, but an actual playoff spot, because they got drubbed the last two times they got into the play-in. It was awful against the Pacers and surprisingly even worse against the Hawks. And so is all that losing, is the lack of doing something, as you might say, in the off seasons, going to lead LaMelo to be the first rookie of that magnitude to turn down the rookie max extension. Well, I asked Brian Windhorst about that, and here's what he had to say. Typically,
you get that first max contract. I have branded it the fun max. It's first off, it's a lesser amount of money than guys who are in their mid-20s in the back of the year, at the back of their careers. It is usually the player signs it. Usually the player is in a good spot. I don't think the Hornets can operate their lives worried about that, but they should operate their lives worried about not having executed bringing in players around LaMelo.
This is the task that the Hornets have, and this is the task that any team has when you hit on a draft pick. It's exactly what's happened with Dallas. The pressure mounts on them. They get to a Western Conference Finals, despite maybe bringing in talent around him. And Jalen Brunson, he has the early meeting with the Knicks, and eventually you lose what was an important player. But I don't know how much they were able to help themselves this offseason, and we'll see what they're able to do in the postseason. But if they are able to do anything, then it's probably going to be because Luka is just so damn good. So you want to get to that title execution. You want to get to places you haven't really been before or been in a while. And we know the Hornets, their lack of conference finals history, 0 conference finals appearances. You want to get to the postseason because it's been a long time since you've done that. What did you make of Brian Windhorst's soundbite, David? And just how important is it for Charlotte to get talent around them, maybe even as soon as this offseason? Like when we say do it quickly, it might give you a window. But how big is that window for Charlotte?
It's time. It's way past time. I mean, we've talked about this. Now, look, the last season's disaster, that was a lot out of their hands. But this offseason, they have to address getting LaMelo help. He's got to be probably included on at least some of these cursory conversations. I think they've done a good job of making him feel like he's heard, that he's a part of what's going on with this franchise, but it's fallen apart so badly over the last 6 months that it's brought this into question. Now, I think the advantage the NBA gives the teams on this is still going to be in their back pocket. Like Wendy didn't sound even a little bit concerned that this may not happen, but it's never happened. But as Doug, commented, LaMelo's rare, right? He's one of one. So he could be the first one to do it, but it would still be shocking. I think at this point, as bad as it is right now, it would still be shocking for him not to take that next step and commit to the Hornets. But they've got to show something. Their draft pick can help a lot, but dude, they have to do something. They got to do something in the front office. They got to make some moves to shake this things up. We'll see what happens with players they've have or have not had conversations with. That could go a long way into coaxing LaMelo to feel like this is a place to spend a few more years. But overall, I think I've backed off being super concerned about that for right now, just because, how many things can we be concerned about at one time? So I think it's a good point, though. They can't operate like that. They've got to operate as if they're continuing to build, which they need to start showing us pretty soon.
Doug, what do you I saw you shrug your shoulders when we talked about being concerned about it. Maybe how worried are you about the possibility of LaMelo leaving?
Well, I don't worry about things that I can't control. So that's number one. I'm not necessarily worried about it. But at the same time, I've said for many seasons that what was that, David?
It was extra deep. It's extra level. I wasn't expecting. Neither one was. I mean,
that got to me too, to be honest. That's funny. All right. My bad, Doug.
Okay. So what I was saying is that for many seasons now, I've said the Hornets should be waking up every morning thinking about how can we put a team around LaMelo that will convince him to be here long term. Now, he said nothing or really operated in any way that would suggest that he would do something that is unprecedented, which is turning that down. But you can't rule it out. But I don't, the Hornets, I think it's a weird thing too in the NBA as they continue to draft players younger and younger and put these players on a trajectory. I guess it's fine when the player is a raw prospect like Kai Jones and is going to take many, many years to see like what he's actually going to become. But it's stranger when it's a player like LaMelo who is young but you treat him like he's young. Like we've seen the Hornets as an organization be a little wary about going all in on LaMelo and saying LaMelo is like the face of this franchise. He's the immediate star. Like they just haven't done that. They when they did the All-Star campaign, they paired him with two other players, Terry Rozier and Miles Bridges. And the comments, during the offseason, in terms of have you been consulting LaMelo Ball on the coaching? They're very careful to say, no, we don't consult any players, but they've just been very careful not to put any kind of aura around LaMelo Ball. And I think a lot of that has to do with their concern that you don't want to do that with a player that young and immature. And yet the clock has started on LaMelo Ball and his, being with the franchise. That timeline has started, whether he's 19 or 24. The timeline is the timeline. And this team has not been focused enough on putting enough talent around LaMelo Ball because this is a process, right? It's not just about like, they're not just going to one year go to the conference finals. You got to get talent around him that takes, a season or two to develop, to get into the playoffs, to win a series, and then get bounced in the second round and then come back again. Like this thing takes years. And if you wait too long, you're going to run out of time. And then, it's going to be on LaMelo to find a place that is legitimately concerned about going through that long process of getting to an NBA Finals.
Well, you're right. I mean, Mitch Kupchak, when he takes answers or questions from the media, he discusses and says, no, LaMelo is not consulted on any of these moves. I don't consult any player. I'm choosing this. And we heard Steve Clifford say yesterday, Scott Fowler, I think he wrote a piece on the Charlotte Observer about this, but he asked Steve Clifford if there was ever a time to shift to youth where you weren't necessarily worried about winning. And Clifford actually said, yeah, there is a time for that where you want to shift to youth and want to make sure that these guys are producing. And
he said
it's
summer
all about
league
player development. You said what?
He said summer league. That's the time when you really want to shift to youth.
Well, he said summer league as far as these guys not. He had some interesting comments.
No, I'm kidding. That was a joke.
Oh, well, no, but he did talk about summer league, with the James Book night, which I thought was hilarious. I mean, with some of these players, but clearly Book night is one of them. No, those comments were interesting. We can get to those, maybe later on in the week. But the point being is that he also said Mitch Kupchak's old school, that he's not going to hand the franchise over to somebody, that young like LaMelo. And honestly, I don't think LaMelo is bothered by it. I mean, I don't think LaMelo is angry at the front office for not having the All-Star campaign solely be about him. I don't think LaMelo, we haven't heard anything that he's so angry about the team not allowing him to make decisions for this franchise. I'm sure he's frustrated with not having enough talent to win. Even look, I mean, the Miles Bridges stuff, that was his friend, and we've heard him say some comments since he was arrested for felony domestic violence and how he's kind of welcomed him back. I mean, he would love to have Miles. Like he wants some of that talent back on this team. So I get the frustration there, but I don't get the sense that LaMelo is so fed up with everything in the organization now. The ultimate goal is to provide him that talent so you can win and give him as much advantage as you possibly can. It's not allowing him to pick the coach. It's not solely giving him the All-Star campaign. You're right, Doug. It is making sure that you build a roster around him. Now, do you want to get to the other Windy soundbite, or do you want to go to the last segment and do that?
Yeah, let's do it in the last segment.
Okay, let's do it in the last segment. Coming up next on the Locked On Hornets podcast.
Don't go to sleep on the Hornets just yet.
Remember when Bill Simmons of The Ringer casually threw in that Charlotte was going to be available for sale? Well, I brought that comment all the way back from September and asked Brian Windhorst about it on Friday and kind of got an answer. We certainly got an interesting one, but I'm not sure we got an answer, if that makes sense. We'll tell you all about it in just a moment. But I did want to tell you that this episode is brought to you by BetOnline. BetOnline.net is your source, your number one source for sports betting info, stats, news, and analysis. And you can get the latest odds and the trends for every professional and amateur league out there. If you love sports podcasts, you can even find those on BetOnline as well. They're always the fastest and the easiest way to get your betting info. You can head to the website today or use your mobile device to learn more. BetOnline, where the game starts. More Windy, shoes, jersey talk. We'll get to all of it coming up next. All right, last soundbite from Brian Windhorst was really interesting. I think I shared it. We played it on Friday, of course. That interview is out there on WFNZ.com. But the Bill Simmons comment from September, where he was talking about the sale of the Phoenix Suns, Robert Sarver, agreeing after all of the problems that he has brought about himself, decides to sell the Phoenix franchise. And Bill Simmons was talking about just how valuable it was going to be. That market, that talent, even with Chris Paul on his way out of the league, you still have quite a bit of talent to work with. And he was discussing like $4.5 billion is what the franchise is worth. And that was surprising. He was projecting it, and it ended up being, quite a bit. Right. So anyways, when he was talking about the sale in passing, I mean, it was weird, but in passing said, and you have Charlotte that's going to become available. And you might have thought about them being in the same value as Minnesota, but, who knows what that franchise is going to be worth. And then he just kept going on. And then, wait, hold on. Charlotte's going to become available? The GOAT? Michael Jordan is about to sell this? I mean, we've always had a little inclination because of the minority sale that he had with Gabe Plotnick, of course, and, a minority stake, but still Michael Jordan operated most of everything else. But we didn't know that he was going to sell everything. In fact, the late, great Rick Bonnell reported that it was only a sale for, a minority stake, and that Michael still operated most of the whole shebang over there. So I asked Brian what that soundbite was about and, Charlotte becoming available. And here's what Brian had to say.
I can't directly answer that question without risking being aggregated the same way that Bill would be. So as far as I know, as of right now, the Hornets are not for sale.
Definitive.
All right.
I mean, he said it. There
All
you
right.
go. Put that to bed.
The speculation music is just all about in my head right now from that answer.
I don't want to speculate.
Yeah. Perfect. It's been a while since we played it, but I think it's worth it here. I mean, David, I hear that, and my speculation meter goes through the roof. Does your meter go through the roof as well?
Yeah, a little bit. I mean, it's always been kind of floated out there, right? Who knows? I don't know. I mean,
I know there's not a lot to do with it, but at the same time, I feel like there is a lot. I don't know what to do with the soundbite.
Yeah, I mean, we don't get much word from anyone from the Hornets, certainly not MJ on this subject. I mean, the rumblings have always been that way, but I think as a Hornets fan, you don't want him to sell. I think he's well, let me say this. There are some Hornets fans that definitely want him to sell. I think if you want the team to stay here forever and ever and ever, you'd have a better shot of doing that if he remains the owner. But who knows? It's just so odd to me that, I looked at his race team and how he's approached that. And I know it's not apples to apples, but it's a very different approach as far as like he's brought in older superstars. They've actually won races, which I think winning a NASCAR race, I guess, would be like the NBA equivalent of making the playoffs or maybe winning a play-in game. I don't know.
That's a good question.
But that's been a very different approach. It's harder to win in the NBA. So I think ultimately you want him to remain. You want him to get some management in here and reshape the front office in a more aggressive fashion. But it doesn't sound like, I don't know how to take it. How did you guys take it on the air? Because it didn't say much.
Well, I mean, we moved on. He said he didn't want to be aggregated, and I'm not about to poke the bear by any means. And so we just moved on. And I think Wes asked I don't know what question was after that, but I did. So at the end of that interview, I said, Brian, I promise we won't aggregate you. And I said that, and then was about to do the outro. And then he said, all right, thanks, bye. And he's a nice guy. I mean, and he's so accommodating. Brian is great anytime I've ever had him on, but just didn't want to be aggregated. Doug,
but maybe when you couple that with the Simmons drive-by, and that's how he usually references the Hornets. It's just a straight drive-by.
Right.
I mean, it starts kind of adding up to a weird feeling, right? I mean, I think that's what you take away from it. Absolutely.
Doug, your thoughts on it?
Yeah, well, I think a lot of people are putting puzzle pieces together and coming up with some kind of angle that the Hornets would be a likely candidate to sell. But I don't think there's any like strong reporting on it. So I think that's why Windhorst here is being careful, because if Windhorst goes on a thing and says, well, if you think about this thing, if you think about the Phoenix sale, if you think about the fact that he did sell a piece of the team already, and you put all of these things together and you understand that, hey, there's a new TV deal coming, a lot of these franchises, the value of them is going to go up, and it's going to be a great time if you did want to sell to sell. And so if you put all that together with, I think anyone could look at this situation and go like, okay, Michael is not an activist owner. Like he's not as you know, there are points at which he inserts himself into the conversation, you know, maybe around draft time and other things, but he's not as like hands-on as some other owners are. And so, you know, I think if you want to put all those puzzle pieces together to make some speculation, you could easily do that. Windhorst being careful here. I would say, you know, I think if you could guarantee me the Hornets would stay in Charlotte, you know, I think an ownership change would benefit the Hornets if you could bring in an owner who was like actively focused on getting as much talent as possible and not as concerned with luxury tax considerations. You know, I would say that would be a benefit. But I also look at this situation that, you know, the NBA is going to look to expand really soon. You finally got Adam Silver talking about it, and he's going to start talking about it more once they get the TV deal done and the next CBA done. Then anything's possible because, you know, a lot of the speculation is that it's going to be two teams out west, Seattle and Las Vegas. It would make things really easy. You know, that's two Western Conference teams. Then you got to do some shuffling around to bring a team over to the Eastern Conference. Like, it would be super easy if instead of expanding to two teams, one of those teams jumped over to the Western Conference from the East. So I would just say, like, be careful, because if this team sells to somebody who's not concerned about keeping the team in Charlotte, then boy, I mean, the market here for basketball is already a little bit tainted by the first move. This would be like, you know, nuclear warhead kind of situation.
And
like,
so,
there's no coming back.
Is the NBA really going to take a second team away from Charlotte and move it out to another city? I mean, I suppose it's possible. It just seems like it would be a lot of goodwill just thrown away on that one. And I think you got to be careful when you're dealing with billionaires. You never know what you're going to get. I mean, look at the Panthers. You know, you never know what you're going to get when you bring a new guy in here who you have no idea what their motivation is, what they want to do.
That's fine, David. That's fine. But my argument, I hear you on that. But my argument would be, I would rather go after something and stop being irrelevant. Because right now they're irrelevant. And I don't think there's anything worse than being the carpenter bee, irrelevant non-threat. Like, at least if you got somebody in there and they made some mistakes early in the process, I would be willing to give them, you know, a little bit of a pass if I could see that there was an intent to actually do something to put a championship team on the floor. But I don't see that right now.
I don't want to make a mountain out of a molehill, but when I hear Brian Windhorst say that, when I hear Bill Simmons say that, if you were to put a group of media members or just people that are tapped into the NBA, that are a messenger to everybody else that consumes that product, they're as tapped in as anybody. And especially when I go to the Michael Jordan sourcing, maybe people around him, whatever, but also when Bill was talking about Phoenix possibly not forcing Robert Sarver out, but the league forcing Robert Sarver out after the explosive article that came out about him. Bill Simmons on his podcast mentioned that the last thing they were going to do if Sarver did not relent and decide to sell the franchise was Michael Jordan, the GOAT, such a powerful figure. There was going to be something from Michael. There was going to be a letter saying from Michael that Robert Sarver needs to be out of the league. And so when Bill has that sourcing from around him, you know, that involves Michael, and then he passingly says through, you know, Charlotte's going to become available. And then you have this from Brian, two guys that are as tapped in as anybody. Yeah, I'm going to read into that. And maybe it's irresponsible, but I'm just telling you right now, like, for me, I take a lot from that. So we'll see what happens.
I also think the NBA values having MJ.
Oh, they absolutely
in that
do.
Group, right?
Yeah.
In that ownership group for sure. 100%.
When he's the only black owner in a black league, which matters.
Yep.
So that's why I think Michael will sell the team and become commissioner of the NBA. That's
there you go. And
aggregate that.
Right, aggregate that one.
Aggregate that.
Both of you. Last thing. All right. I know you guys wanted to talk about the this jersey opinion, right? What was the tweet that was sent out that you guys wanted to discuss as far as marketing goes within the association and the jerseys, where you just have all of these courts, all of these jerseys that franchises are releasing now? David, what was it you wanted to discuss?
Well, I think, Doug, you sent it to me. I actually replied to that Nate Jones tweet. He was going off about there's too many jerseys, too many courts. Basically, no one can tell if you're not a day-to-day NBA fan. You turn a game on, you're like, who the heck is playing this game? Where are they playing it? And what are these colors they're wearing it? And I agreed with it. I mean, I said back at the start of the season when the Hornets rolled out their newest whatever. You don't even know the names of these jerseys. City, whatever, the purple jersey. It looks very similar to the
I
other
get
purple
Statement
jersey.
and City mixed up all the time. I have
Right.
zero clue which one is which.
Well,
Right.
because it's
So there's
dumb
just too
marketing.
many
It's
of them.
dumb Nike marketing language. Like, it doesn't make any, it doesn't matter.
It's nonsense. But his point was that, there's no real feel or branding to any of these teams. They're losing a lot of the identity that comes with them inherently. And I agree. It's too many jerseys. I never thought I'd be the guy to say too many jerseys. I love a good New Jersey, but every year there's not one New Jersey. There's at least two, with every team. And so unless you're the Celtics or maybe the Bulls or the Knicks or somebody, I mean, you don't know what the team is going to look like from night to night. And then another person replied that, like, yes, they're doing this for marketing, and you can hardly get any of these new jerseys for purchase too. It doesn't make a lot of sense as to what they're doing. I like having a fresh take on things, and I like having a cool new jersey every once in a while, but they have really gone off the deep end, in my opinion, on some of these, and they just need to scale it back. And can the home teams wear white at home? Let's just go back to that. On any level of basketball, the home team wears white. It still throws me off when I see the home team in the colored jerseys. But that was my thought, Doug. What did you have to say?
I disagree. And I'll tell you why I disagree, because I think, the NBA, I think, understands on a fundamental level that the youths, the kids, are not they're not engaged with watching entire NBA games. They're engaged with watching highlights. They're not engaged in like being lifelong fans of a team. They're much more star focused now. They follow their favorite players on Instagram and TikTok. And like, think about just what about sort of young culture would lead you to believe that they really want to like watch one thing over and over, whether it be a jersey or a video. Like, that's the whole thing with TikTok is like, boom, video scroll, boom, video scroll, boom, video scroll. Like, it's all about changing and just, color fantastic. Let's throw as much against the wall as possible, sell a couple of jerseys and move on. Again, you can love that or not love that, but that's kind of the reality that I think the NBA is embracing here, and Nike is embracing and saying, let's just do something different every year so that people have something new to look at. And I think we can sit here and go, well, we love the days when there were only 3 jerseys and we could really identify with something, but I'm just not sure that that's how people that are 10 years younger or 15 years younger than us are really thinking about things.
Yeah, and I think winning tradition is the thing that helps. Because, David, you mentioned the Celtics, and then you go to the Lakers, and those are the teams that can get away with the purple and gold that has been there for a while, and the Celtics can get away with the traditional green that is not loud by any stretch, and they can get away with that because they win. And you wonder if these franchises are trying to flip over a new leaf, so to speak, to try to figure, all right, well, let's just put all that in the past and then let's move on. And then let's give
those loser teams something to sell.
Yes, exactly. But I think I'm going to do the whole fence sitting thing and fall in between. I think I don't know if it matters so much that it takes a little longer to watch a game and then figure out who's playing so much. I do think that the NBA is clearly marketing individual players, but I do think that there is so many jerseys that I just don't understand the point, so to speak. I don't understand like why there is so many beyond. If you also, it's not like I see all of these jerseys all the time. I see the Min City Edition jerseys here in Charlotte. I see the classics. I see the current ones, and that's pretty much about it. And I mean, and even some of the other City Edition, I'll tell you what I don't see a whole lot of. You remember the one, I forget of their city or statement, but the gradient jersey, I don't see that a whole lot. Right, like you got to hit, and then
they go away from it. Here's the only thing you need to know why they have too many jerseys. The Hornets in this rotation this year, they don't have any of the classic, the retro, the throwback, like the best uniform I think in their arsenal. Right, the ones they wore the inaugural year, they don't even wear those anymore this year. But I guess they have too many. So I think they should always have that in the rotation and maybe a couple of other ones. So it just gets out of hand at some point. Look, no one likes a good jersey reveal. The leaks around the beginning of the season, always fun, Doug, always a good time. But it's just, you can't get your hands around all of them. And you should have some of them all the time.
And why are both teams wearing jerseys? Let's just go shirts and skins. I mean, that's, let's go YMCA.
Bring back sleeves.
No. Hey, the one jersey I haven't seen in a while? The Charlotte Hornets Christmas edition jersey.
Oh my God.
Yeah. That's one. Okay, thank you, Doug. I think your dismounts every segment have been awesome, and like every single hot take, Christmas jerseys, it's fantastic.
How about we focus on the All-Star
Aggregate
jerseys? How about we focus
I was
our
thinking
energy
that
on the
too.
All-Star jerseys,
Yeah.
guys? Come on, let's get back to good All-Star jerseys.
Oh yeah, it's been forever. I get zero hope now when they reveal the NBA All-Star jerseys. It's all very, very bad. All right, thanks for making us your first listen. That'll do it for Locked On Hornets. That's Doug Branson. I just saw the post go up. Go check out his Substack, everyhornetsboxscore.com. That's David Walker, the Pharaoh of foot candy. We need to talk Jordans next. I want to talk about Jordans because I'm finally hooked on the narcotic, so we need to get on that as well. Thanks for making us your first listen. We're free and available anywhere you get your pods. Now make your second listen Game to Game NBA. Every moment, every top performance, every result. Locked On Game to Game covers every single game from across the NBA with local analysis that only Locked On can deliver. Follow Game to Game on Locked On NBA, available on the Odyssey app, YouTube, and wherever you get your podcast. Have a great rest of your day, and we'll be back with you tomorrow.